We now take you to the broadcast of It's Time with Reverend Nathaniel W. Martin. Here's Reverend Martin.
Thank you, Dr. Blackwell. Let me say Hotep Habarigani to my Africana Studies colleagues and contemporaries and seekers after truth all. And let me say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, but never good night, and certainly never, ever goodbye, because I've always found goodbyes traumatizing. I said I have always found goodbyes traumatizing. That's personal. Doesn't say that's on you. All right, my name is the Reverend Nathaniel Wayne Martin. I'm the pastor of the New Life Institutional Baptist Church here in the city of Los Angeles, and we're located at 8916 South Main Street. We're being hosted by our sister church, the Shiloh Missionary Christian Church, pastored by my good friend, the Reverend Dr. Della F. Holliday. And you know, they always say when the Baptists and the Charismatics get together, there's always going to be a shouting in the camp. And surely God has blessed our fellowship and has blessed our communion. And we're looking forward to more years and more days of God's Pentecostal indwelling. If you're in the area, come by and worship with us. It will be a blessing to you. Amen. Now, the offering that you are viewing is entitled It's Time, and this is a social justice offering presentation, because we realize that you cannot worship or serve God, especially in a bubble or in a vacuum. You're going to have to be out here with the saints and the sinners, the rights and the wrongs, the blacks and the whites, and all the rest of us. And so that is how, that is why this particular offering or presentation is dedicated. We look beyond the veil, so to speak, as Dr. Du Bois intoned, and we try to see how we can help and serve our fellow brothers and sisters as we all march up the King's Highway towards heaven. All right. I take this time to not assume, but to just believe that all of us are believers in God, and that some of us are Bible believers, and that even if you're not a Bible believer, you have a belief in the right as opposed to the wrong, and so we can proceed from there. All right, we all bring our truth, we all bring our standards into the conversation, and we go from there. So may God bless all of us and bless all of you. This that we are doing today is sort of like a rehash, a fresh look, if you will, at the history of the United States of America, and especially as it applies to God's chosen people. Yes, the black man is God's chosen people, regardless how the Israelis treat the Philasha Jews. We are all God's people, and this is the only world that God made for us to live in. And I'm assuming that most of us have educated ourselves beyond the mistakes or the errors of race and racism. And if you haven't, that you will be so moved to grow beyond that as you view these broadcasts. Remember, race does not occur in nature. Race does not occur in history until the very latter years of the European dominance of the world, when color rather, became a factor. Racism, by some scholars, racism is the spawn, or racism spawned race. because by racism we mean the economic exploitation of a particular group of people. And as Alexander Stevens, the vice president of the Confederacy, said that their foundation was laid and that cornerstone rested on the fact of the inferiority or the subject that the African was to be in subjection to the white man, that his normal condition and his natural and normal condition was as in servitude. And so coming up from there, now we have all of the mistakes and the errors and the sins and the transgressions, if you will, and the iniquities that have just continued to metastasize. Let's use the word metastasize, which is a medical term for how cancer spreads throughout the body. Call it metastasize. They don't say it proliferate. They say it has metastasized. And racism has metastasized all over this world, so that it is in the structure of our systems. We are racist without being aware of it. The example I used to use was that a person no longer had to call me the N-word, but look how their policies and their practices affected you. That was one of the things that was so galling about George Walker Bush, GW, the one that got us into the Iraq and the Iran debacles. He spoke very well. He's affable. He's friendly. He would sit down and have a beer with you. But his policies were so antithetical to that smile or to that beer drinking. And one of the highlights of his examples that I always refer to was what happened to the people of New Orleans in the post-Katrina era. Those people never got back. And as a matter of fact, the George Bush flew over New Orleans, but he did not come down to New Orleans. And so the ships never arrived. The buses never arrived. The rescue never arrived until 4 or 5 days late. And so that was a high point if you wanted to talk about practices. And while we're on that, let us look at the interest in W.E.B. Du Bois, the renewed interest in W.E.B. Du Bois, who was born, I think, in 1868, and he died August 27th, 1963. But he was a prolific anthropologist, he was prolific sociologist, and he was an even more prolific writer. He wrote constantly essays. And remember, they didn't have these computers that we have, but he wrote so extensively and effectively about the conditions under which the black man or the colored man in his day, the Negro in his day, remember we didn't become black with the Black Pride thing until the middle of the 60s. James Brown was the one who coined the phrase, "I'm black and I'm proud." Stokely Carmichael was the one who began to first raise his fist and talk about black power. And so from then on, we have, from 63 onward, we have kind of, pushed aside or tried to go past. Don't say Negro or don't say colored no more. But when I was born, 1947, you was colored. You was Negro when you wasn't the N-word. And it just recently, in recent years, that we have stopped. A lot of comedians still use it, but and a lot of hip-hoppers, rappers, so-called, still use that negative term, but we are trying to get past that. But to my point, Ron DeSantis is running for president of the United States. And you know, he's the governor of Florida, and under his administration, they have ruled out the AP studies courses, advanced placement courses that were going to be instituted in the high schools and the colleges, because he did not want, as he declared, he did not want the children of Florida to get to be made ashamed or to have a complex. And you have to dig into the things like that and see what's behind this shame that Mr. DeSantis does not want the children of Florida to be subjected to. And remember, he's running for president of the United States now. So if you see the policies that he is instituting in his own state of Florida, think what he will do if he assumes the presidency of the entire United States. If he is against AP studies that include black history, or that would teach black history, because right now you cannot teach black history in Florida. And there are several other things that you cannot do, which we see as a violation of free speech. But let's stick with this historical moment, because we want to look through the lens of the late Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois. How would he view Ron DeSantis, and the governor Ron DeSantis as he is right now? And how would he view his call for no shame, none of the children to be made shame? First thing you would have to see was that black people have been made shame ever since they were kidnapped from their homeland on the continent of Africa, the West African side and the East African side, the Gold Coast and the other coast, and forcefully transported by the Europeans to be traded in the Caribbeans and in the West Indies and in the Bahamas and in Haiti, and ultimately in the land which we now call the United States. Remember, the slavery was first instituted, began to spread to the Colombias and to the West Indies and to all of the outlying Caribbean islands, and it was on the island of Haiti in the Dominican Republic, and they were trying to not only advance slavery there, but also in Cuba. Remember, we are still mad at Cuba, and we're still mad at Haiti. Cuba was victorious in throwing off the yoke of colonialism, or slavery as it were, and Haiti was successful in throwing off the yoke of slavery, which made, after that, the defeat of Napoleon, and which made him sell the Louisiana Purchase, which we all studied in elementary school and high school, which doubled the size of the United States of America. Now, remember, we fought a bitter Civil War, which began in 1861 and did not conclude until 1865. And from 1865 to 1877, we had a period which we call the Reconstruction era, which, according to Dr. Du Bois, was the golden era, because in that era, the people who had been formerly enslaved were able to get in seats in the legislatures and to formulate laws and bills that, among other things, guaranteed every citizen a public education. All black people have always valued education and valued reading, valued learning. You could read any of the writings of Frederick Douglass or any of the others of that period, and they would tell you how they all valued learning how to read. It's a shame today that our young people don't value reading and don't value education. But enough of that. What I want to get to is that after the 1877 compromise, by which Rutherford B. Hayes became president, then he had agreed with the Southerners to withdraw the Northern troops from the get their feet off the neck of the Southern Confederates, who were still rabidly against the Yankees, as they call them, and when Hayes was able to make an agreement with the South, the Southerners, that if he was elected, that he would let them from then on handle what they call the Negro problem. We've always been a problem. In fact, W.E.B. Du Bois asked that question: what is it like to be regarded as a problem? Going from there up until they had reinstated the black codes, where they developed the black codes, and they had developed sharecropping because you were no longer slaves based upon the 13th Amendment. But if you were, they being the southern states, all of the southern states, began to develop laws and codes and statutes that said if you're a Negro and you are not employed by a certain date, then you're in violation and you can be arrested for loitering, and that you can be put on a convict detail, and you would have to work off your fine. And while you were working off your fine, which remember you didn't have no money no way, then the prison or the jails would lease you out in what they call convict leasing situations, which means that you might not never get off of that plantation, because that was what it was all about, to get cheap labor back on the plantations, so the Southerners could resume their profit making, and that is what happened. And so the laws were that you had to step off the sidewalk if a white person was approaching. You couldn't look a white person in the eye. You couldn't play checkers or something. All of these type of laws are more restrictive and more restrictive. And if you were going to what they call the picture show back at that time, that you could not sit downstairs. You could not. It had to be segregated on a segregated basis. And so if you were colored or Negro, you would have to sit upstairs if you could afford to purchase the ticket for the show. And then, of course, segregated restrooms, segregated restaurants, segregated bus terminals. Everything was separated, even though they tried to say that everything was separate but equal. But getting up to what I want to discuss about Dr. Du Bois' observation, as I said, he was born in 1868. The Civil War ended in 1865, and the next war, which was World War I, began in actually 1914 through 1919. Now remember, we had all of this segregation. The country was segregated. The United States of America was segregated from the hospital to the graveyard. You had separate graveyard cemeteries for whites, and you had separate cemeteries for Negroes. You didn't bury Negroes with white folks. White folks didn't want to be buried with Negroes. That was the law, and that was the custom. Now, in that situation, I assume was prevalent even in the northern, more liberal cities. But they likewise practiced the same segregation, not as strictly as they did once you went south, but there are plenty of reports of people who ran up on racism or Jim Crow, surprisingly, in like Pennsylvania and New York and in Washington D.C. And let me likewise hasten to remind you that Washington D.C. had been desegregated by Abraham Lincoln, but it was resegregated under no less a person than Woodrow Wilson, who was the founder of the organization of League of Nations. That was his project. He organized the League of Nations to get the nations together so there would be no more war. And remember the war, World War I, when we went into it, it was a war to make the world safe for democracy. That was the theme. And that was what brings us to W.B. Du Bois, because W.B. Du Bois wrote an essay in the NAACP newspaper, which they call the Crises, and which he asked us to close ranks. And he said for the Negro to put aside his pain of racism and pull ranks to get ranks together so that we could fight this common enemy of German fascism, which was American racism. But there in Germany it was fascism. The Germans wanted to exterminate the Jews. You can't make this stuff up, folks. Then, and just like the white folks wanted to exterminate the Negroes then and now. All right, so notwithstanding all of that segregation and all of those wrongs that were being daily perpetrated against black people all over the world, all over the country, well, really all over the world, but especially in this country, Du Bois wrote an essay entitled Closed Ranks with our white brothers, and let us go and make the world safe for democracy, and then we shall come back, and the United States is going to treat us much, much better, because we have shed blood and we have fought together in order to preserve democracy. All right, now, after the war, mind you, the Negro was treated atrociously, outrageously, outrageous. If you read the personal diaries and letters, and you look at even the War Department records, how despitefully the Negro soldier was used and misused in World War I. And Du Bois even discovered that there was a secret code, a secret information that was being disseminated to the French troops, which when the French authorities found out about it, they pulled every record of that secret information. And the secret information was that Negroes had tails. You can't make this stuff up, folks. Remember, just like the society, U.S. society was segregated, the U.S. military was reflection of the society. Which brings us to the point that we're going to close out on today, which is the VA hospital. After the war, after the atrocities and the indignities of the war, and we had won the war, remember it was the war was won on the 11th hour, on the 11th day in the 11th month, you remember, for you history buffs, of 1919. and that was when the guns fell silent. All right, so when the troops began to come home, the 369th and 368th Black Infantry regiments were loudly feted, and festivals when they marched down the streets of New York and when they marched down the streets of Harlem. But when it came time for the hospitals, and which began to treat the veterans, and let me see, remember in Abraham Lincoln's second inaugural address, he had said, with malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right, as God shall give us to see the right, let us strive to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wound, this is about the Veterans Hospital, and to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan, to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations. And so you would be surprised to know that the Negro problem popped up right there, because the Southerners did not want the Negroes to have a veterans hospital in the state of Alabama. The federal government had decided to put a hospital in Tuskegee to treat the Negroes. I got to wrap this up. But the white folks were fearful, the Treasury Department were fearful that the presence of black bodies would harm the morale of white veterans, or, as it had during the war, inflame racial hostilities. Northern public health officials routinely segregated black veterans at local hospitals or denied them service altogether. You can't make this up. This is the report of Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois. It's found in this book here. I don't know if you can see that. The Wounded World. It was the Black Soldier and the Wounded World was the complete title. And W.B. Du Bois went overseas, actually went to Europe, to France, and did interviews. And one of the great people of that era was Colonel Charles Young, who should have been made the first general, black general, in the U.S. Army, because he had, he had conquered, and he had deservedly assumed all of the ranks, but the white Southerners did not want to make no Negro a black general, so they retired him. Anyway, I'm through, but you see the hypocrisy then, as you can see the hypocrisy continued to be right here now. Again, I say unto you, as the Screenwriters Guild is still out on strike, if you are working on a job and they don't want to pay you, take my advice and don't work for them. All right? Thank you, Doc. We're out of here.